Glad to see you're surviving CES, although apparently your razor is not surviving CES, but, you know, it's the first casualty. So, Brian, you look great. You look great, that's all that matters, and no one cares how you feel. Brian, I think it's really interesting that Samsung is reducing the number of phones that they sell as they try to remain, you know, the most important company in cell phones.
You know what? I think what you look at, Corey, is look at the Apple model. Apple just has one phone. Well, right now they really have, you know, three, if you think about the different sizes. But I think there's something to be said for simplicity and narrowing down the number of SKUs you had. You know, at one point Nokia had 50 SKUs as well. And it's a lot of work to try and manage the components and the makeup of many SKUs. So I think it's smart to bring it down to fewer SKUs for them over time if they want to be competitive with Apple and with a lot of these Chinese players who have been eating their lunch, you know, for the last 9 months.
Yeah, and their market share, you know, you can see the market share sort of coming down quarter by quarter. Gradually, it's still impressive, and every other cell phone maker would love to have that kind of market share. But as their market share declines, you know, I was doing some sort of back-of-the-envelope calculations this morning on the numbers they put out last night, and, you know, their operating profits are tiny compared to Apple. They might sell the most phones, but they don't make the most money.
They don't. And, you know, one of the reasons for that is it's the ASP. A lot of Samsung's business has been at the mid-tier. They have a little bit of a low-end business, but as you've seen more competition from Xiaomi, ZTE, Huawei, and a lot of these Chinese players over the last year, Samsung's had to come down in price quite a bit. And a lot of their phones are still very expensive to make. So they're not getting the same profit margins that Apple is, who is selling a lot of $600, $700, and even $800 plus phones. You know, the high-end iPhone 6 Plus with 128 gigabytes is almost $1,000, and so you obviously, you know, you get a much higher margin, a much higher profit margin off of those higher average selling prices.
So, you know, I've always looked at the way they run their semiconductor business, where they've announced a huge capital expenditure project to build more fabs, to build more mobile phone semiconductors. I've always thought of that as kind of the canary in the coal mine for them, where they're going in the direction, or they're letting the other cell phone makers tell them what they want in the chip, so that Samsung can then design their phones around that. Is it possible we see a change of focus in Samsung where the chip business will be the main thing, not the devices themselves?
You know what? I think that they need that chip business to be strong in the years ahead because of this decline we're seeing in their mobile business, in their smartphone business. You know, they were the exclusive manufacturer of Apple's A-series chips, which were, you know, in all of the iPads and the iPhones. It's only been since, we think, 2013 that Apple negotiated an agreement with TSM and took a lot of that business away. Now we understand Samsung's trying to get that back. You know, it's a very profitable business, and the volumes are obviously substantial from just Apple alone, who I think a number of years ago was maybe 70+% of their business in the foundry unit. So I think I think what they have to do is they have to find some new areas of growth. You mentioned earlier the Internet of Things. Samsung's booth is actually right behind me, about 50 yards behind me, and the Internet of Things connected appliances is a huge trend for them. They're also showing a competitor to the Oculus Rift. So in addition to foundry and the Internet of Things and this, you know, this virtual reality thing, I think Samsung is just looking for new areas of growth, and they think it's Internet of Things, but it would be nice if the foundry business can be a grower for them as well.
All right, but Brian, I mean, what do you think a chip costs? Let's say, what does a Samsung get in revenues for an iPhone A6 chip or A7 chip, whatever the new one is, and what do they get for an Internet of Things chip? Dollar amount, ASP. Make a random guess here. What is it, like $85 for an iPhone?
Well, I think,
and a couple dollars for an Internet of Things chip.
You know what? I think about it more like $25, $30 for a baseband chip, and it's probably, you know, $5 for an Internet of Things chip. So you bring up a good point. A big discrepancy in the average selling price. The difference is that if we really do see connected devices throughout homes over the next 2 years, the number actually will be bigger than even this 1.5 billion unit smartphone market. So in other words, I agree. The ASPs are small, but the overall opportunity is substantial over the next several years.
But if there's that difference, I mean, they would have to sell 600% more of those chips than the phone chips they're selling right now. That's quite a burden. I guess I wonder is the center of Samsung gonna be chips, not devices?
I think that it could shift to chips. They're hoping it's going to be both. You know, they're showing connected dishwashers over there. They're showing a lot of connected appliances. But think about it in this way, Corey. You have maybe 1 or 2 smartphones in your home, maybe 4 if you have kids. How many different appliances do you have and things that can be connected, including light switches? It's probably 50 if you think about connected chip opportunities versus maybe 3 or 4 phones. So if we all really do have connected devices throughout our homes over the next 5 years, then the Internet of Things will be bigger than smartphones, and it will be a substantial opportunity for Samsung.
Yeah, it's interesting. Did you see, I mean, I need someone to load my dishwasher, not to run it with a chip for me. I don't know that chip's going to help that. But what have you seen? So you mentioned the Oculus Rift thing, and I saw that from Samsung a few months ago when I was in New York, and it really was just an Oculus device that they said was made by Samsung. It wasn't any sort of special Samsung stuff. That may have changed. Did you see anything that was kind of ridiculous over at that Samsung booth?
Well, the connected dishwasher is one thing that I find very interesting. I wouldn't call it ridiculous, but I do wonder about the utility of connecting some of these devices. I mean, it makes sense to connect lights and you know, a lot of things. I'm not sure that my refrigerator, could be good, but I didn't see anything really that ridiculous. Everybody's doing curved screens right now, and I think they're really beautiful, but I'm not sure that it's really an enhanced experience that it's going to really, drive, huge demand over the next several years. But a lot of these, these panel companies are making the bet that that's the next thing. Nothing really ridiculous. The Oculus Rift and Samsung's version of it, it sounds ridiculous until you actually use it. When you try this, it's really, really amazing how good it is, and it's a truly immersive experience. I think that could end up being huge. Obviously, Facebook feels the same way.
No, I did try that in New York, and it was pretty crazy. In this case, they had a thing that was meant to look like a Mongolian yurt. And I put the Oculus Rift thing on, looked at all the people in front of me who were sitting in the yurt. One was making soup and one was playing music. And then as I turned my head, there was someone behind me and someone next to me, and it was just a crazy. Is that the same demo they were doing?
It's startling. Yeah, that's not the one that I saw. The one I saw had a game inside, and you feel like you're in the game, but it's the same thing. You look behind you, and it feels very real. And I think until you try this, I think it's hard to understand why this could be meaningful or how it could be big or why Facebook paid billions of dollars for it. But you try it, and you quickly become a believer.